Okay girls, the first thing you need is one cooking apple. If you haven't got a cooking apple at home, then use 2 eating apples. If you use eating apples, you might not need to add as much sugar when you stew the apple. What we're going to do is, with the vegetable peeler, we're just going to peel the apple now. Okay, once the apple's peeled, we're going to use the bridge hold to cut it in half, and then put the flat side down on the surface, and we're going to cut it into quarters. Then we need to take the core out, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it between my thumb and first finger, and I'm going to cut down to form a V shape, and that should remove the core. There we go. There's still a little bit of peeling there, so we'll just get rid of that. You need to work quickly with your apple because the action of the air will cause the skin to brown, and so we want to get it into water and get it cooking as quickly as we can. Once we've removed all of the core from the apples, we need to then cut it into slices. Again, notice I'm using the bridge hold, which is the safest way to hold it. Once I've sliced it, I'm then just going to cut it into little chunks like that. Once all the apple is prepared, we're going to put it into a small saucepan to stew it, which is a way of softening it. And if you look, I've put a very small amount of water in the bottom of the saucepan, just enough to cover the base, and that will stop the apple from sticking as it starts to cook. So I'm going to put that into the saucepan, and I'm also going to add some sugar and some mixed spice. You don't need to add the mixed spice, I think it makes it taste really nice. And I'm going to put that onto a very low heat, and I'm just going to cook that very gently for 5 to 10 minutes. This is making a very small quantity of apple crumble, so if at home you want to cook more, then that's fine. You'll need to just double or triple the ingredients. In this bowl, I've got 40 grams of plain flour, and I've got 25 grams of butter. The butter's hard, it's straight out of the fridge, and I've cut it into cubes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rub the fat into the flour, and you've all done this before, girls, several times, but just what you're needing to do is you're rubbing it gently between your fingers like that, and you need to lift the butter out of the mixing bowl when you're rubbing in, because that helps to incorporate air into the mixture, and the more air you can incorporate, the better, because it will make your crumble lighter and just better. When you think you've rubbed in all of the fat, the way to check to see whether or not any lumps remain, I can see lumps remain here, but just so that I can demonstrate, if you shake the bowl, any lumps that are still in the mixture will rise to the top, so you can see all of those lumps still at the top. So you need to very quickly and gently work to get that butter rubbed in. It's important that you keep your hands cold throughout this, because if they're really warm and hot, that will cause the butter to melt, and it will cause the mixture to form lumps instead of achieving a breadcrumb-like state, which is what we're aiming for. Once the butter and flour have been rubbed in and they look like this, which is fine breadcrumbs, you're going to add the sugar and the oats. So it's 25 grams of sugar and that's 10 grams of oats, and mix them in, and that is the crumble topping made. So in order to make the crumble, we are going to put the stewed apple, which you can see is soft. There's not a load of liquid in it. If you do have liquid left at this point, I would try and drain some of it off, otherwise it will end up just really quite sloppy. So you're going to put the apple in the bottom of your dish, and then all you're going to do is cover the top with your crumble mixture, and then that will go in the oven for about 20 minutes until the top is nicely golden brown. Just carefully spreading that out evenly to cover all of the crumble. whilst the crumble is cooking, you can make the custard. So I've got all of the ingredients ready here. I've got 150 millilitres of milk. So I'm going to put that into a saucepan and I'm going to start heating that gently. I don't want to let it boil because otherwise it will boil over and we want to avoid that happening. But whilst that's doing its thing, I need to get the other custard ingredients ready. So what I need are 2 egg yolks. So I need to separate my eggs. I'm going to show you 2 different ways of doing this. The first way of separating the eggs is by just getting 1 egg and tapping it, and then moving the egg yolk from one side to the other. You need to be very careful not to break the yolk. If you're not as confident to do that, then there's another way which is a little bit more foolproof. If you crack the egg onto a plate and then use a pastry cutter, you can then carefully tip the egg white into the dish. Without breaking the yolk. Okay. You don't need to use the egg whites today, so you can save those. I have got a recipe for meringues, which is quite a good use of egg whites. So in this little jug now, we've got 2 egg yolks. I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of corn flour and 25 grams of sugar. So I'm going to tip those in, and then with my spoon I'm just going to mix those to make a real orangey paste. I'm also going to add to that 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Okay girls, as the milk looks like it's about to boil, it will form a skin on the top and it will start to bubble. You want to catch it just before it starts to boil, and that is very nearly there now. And then we're going to remove it from the heat, and we're going to pour it slowly into our egg yolk, corn flour, sugar and vanilla extract mixture, stirring it all the time. If we don't stir it, then the starch in the corn flour will want to start to form lumps. So once we've mixed all of that in, we're then going to pour it back into the saucepan, and we're going to put it back on the heat, and we're going to bring it back to the boil. It's really important at this point that you stir your custard all of the time. What is happening is the starch grains in the corn flour are now absorbing the liquid of the milk as it's heated, and they are swelling. And they're swelling and they are trying to form big lumps, so we have to keep stirring it to stop that from happening. What happens is at 60 degrees they start to burst, and they release a gel-like substance when they burst, and that is called gelatinization, and that is what thickens your custard. That process finishes at just on 100 degrees. So we need to bring this to the boil, but as soon as it does boil we need to take it off the heat. Because of the eggs, there's a danger that this will split, and we want to avoid that from happening. So I'm stirring it until it just about boils, and then I will take it off the heat. If you were to make apple crumble for GCSE, the apple crumble on its own is not classed as a high skill dish, but apple crumble together with homemade custard is classed as high skill because of the sauce making involved in the custard. I can feel that's really starting to thicken nicely now, and that's the starch grains in the corn flour bursting. And I'm just carefully stirring it and just waiting until I start to see a bubble appear. It's important you do this over a low heat, as a high heat would just cause it all to burn on the base of the pan. And that's now ready, so I'm going to take that off the heat and put it into the jug ready to serve.